Whether they came about during a delusional yet productive car ride, or just became a thing on the back of a cheeky rib at another performer's expense. These are the real reasons how and why certain notable wrestling trademarks were actually brought into existence. Gareth here from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 behind-the-scenes reasons for wrestling characters' quirks. Number 10. Great Balls of Fire inspired the woo! Ric Flair's simple but effective woo is still being heard in arenas all over the world today, whenever a performer opts to let loose a sickening chap on an opponent. But far from randomly deciding one day that he would unleash the eventually iconic 3-letter release out of the blue, Flair would actually reveal later down the road that the woo came onto his radar whilst driving from town to town one night back in the mid-70s. Listening to Jerry Lee Lewis's well-known Great Balls of Fire track on his way to a TV taping, an inspired Flair decided there and then that he needed to debut his own trademark woo whilst listening to the explosive tune. Sure enough, upon treating the fans to this new piece of wrestling gold, the crowd-friendly woo caught on instantly, as he put it. And after finally choosing to transition this soon-to-be trademark catchphrase onto television, it took off, and is still being wielded by both fans and Flair's own daughter Charlotte to this day. Number 9. The Rock trying to make The Undertaker laugh leads to the people's elbow. It had absolutely no right to click in the way it did with the masses, but that's just the power of the Great One. I'm of course talking about the most electrifying move in sports entertainment, and one of the dumbest finishers ever to grace a squared circle in the form of the people's elbow. But The Rock wasn't exactly oblivious to how ridiculous this whole thing was. In fact, the sequence itself was actually forged as little more than a way to make the typically stoic Undertaker crack during a 6-person bout. That's according to head of WWE Creative Triple H at least, with the game revealing back in 2020 that Rocky opted to go for the silliest move imaginable as a way to force the dead man into cracking a smile. But instead of being a one and done, the crowd ultimately loved the audacious elbow drop, and Rocky had no choice but to run with it for the rest of his time as an in-ring performer. And after all that, Taker still didn't so much as smirk at Rocky's ludicrous displays. Number 8. Johnny Drip Drip was born on a car ride. Much like Ric Flair's woo, John Morrison's eventual Drip Drip persona was also created in response to the chosen music being blared out in a vehicle. Instead of Great Balls of Fire, however, on this occasion the likes of Morrison, his wife Taya Valkyrie, Tessa Blanchard and Kiera Hogan were enjoying the sounds of Cardi B on their journey, as you do. And it was whilst the tired group were making their way to a 24-hour diner in New York that a delirious Johnny decided to flex his rapping muscles in the car. As the star himself would eventually note to TV Insider though, despite his spouse thinking he was actually pretty good, Valkyrie still didn't fully appreciate his love of switching up Cardi B's lyrics with stuff like "Who got that drip drip speak? Johnny." And you can hardly blame her, eh? But Morrison clearly knew he was onto something, and this annoying shtick was soon brought into the WWE landscape when the star branded himself as Johnny Drip Drip during his first rap song with The Miz. And the performer's newfound penchant for water metaphors? That was likely also born out of the former Frankie Monet's hatred of the word moist. The lesson here, if it brasses off your wife, it'll likely piss off the rest of the universe. Number 7. Vince McMahon's Stephanie critique gives Teddy Long an idea. Few catchphrases have ever consistently conjured up a feeling of unfiltered excitement and anticipation quite like the sound of Teddy Long declaring to the SmackDown audience that a star would be going one-on-one with The Undertaker. Yeah, this wasn't just a glorious line handed to the former Blue Show general manager all those years ago. As it goes, Long was actually watching former WWE chairman Vince McMahon give his daughter Stephanie some all-important advice backstage when the seed was first planted for this legendary phrase. As he'd eventually explain on an episode of his aptly titled One-on-One podcast, sometime before he ever unleashed his first version of the catchphrase, Teddy witnessed Vince telling Stephanie to add a bit more enthusiasm into her introducing of a wrestler one night, with Long sensing that the boss really wanted her to build the guy up when introducing. Taking note, that's precisely what Long ultimately did later down the road when tasked with a promo where he would be introducing the iconic Deadman. And just like that, one of the most satisfying statements in WWE history arrived on the scene. Number 6. The Claymore Kick was a complete gear-induced accident. Is there a more explosive finisher currently being utilized on WWE programming than Drew McIntyre's emphatic Claymore Kick? Probably not. Yet for a while there, the Scottish Warrior didn't actually use this modified big boot of sorts to get the job done, with Drew instead relying on his Future Shock DDT in the period before letting loose the Flying Foot of Doom for the win. However, it was a happy accident whilst working as a member of 3MB at the start of the 2010s that ultimately led to McIntyre landing on the Claymore as his new weapon of choice. Whilst donning the super tight leather pants the company had created for Drew to wear during this spell, it soon became clear that delivering a running big boot wouldn't be all that simple when decked out in 80s tight rock and roll pants. So when the eventual WWE champion went to nail his opponent with said maneuver for the first time, whilst wearing the restricting garments, the star was forced to improvise and kick up his other leg so not to split his trousers at the crotch. And despite admittedly knocking himself silly, Drew soon clocked that he'd stumbled upon a rather special trademark move thanks to those unwanted leather bottoms. Number 5. Ron Simmons' damn was initially a reaction to things going wrong in the ring. Everyone has their go-to phrase they choose to erupt into existence whenever things start to go somewhat sideways. And in the case of wrestling legend Ron Simmons, said reliable instinctive outburst ultimately went on to become far more integral to his on-screen character than he ever likely imagined. Jumping back to a time before Simmons was synonymous with an awkward pause swiftly followed by an almighty damn, the APA worker would typically find himself letting slip that very word whenever things started to go wrong for the former Farouk and Bradshaw during one of their tag matches. Sure enough, fans in the first 6 or 7 rows would regularly catch Simmons' frustrated damns, with more and more folks in attendance chanting the word back to the former WCW World Heavyweight Champion every time the team returned to those towns. In the end, backstage writers were said to have spotted this organic reaction and decided to try and make some magic out of the connection. So during an eventual televised exchange between John Cena and Booker T later down the road, Simmons was instructed to just walk out and shout his tried and tested damn after the back and forth had finished. And another glorious catchphrase was born. Number 4. Wardlow's powerbombs were a joke suggestion from Jericho. Ever wondered where Wardlow got the insane yet inspired idea of smashing his opponent into the mat with multiple earth-shaking powerbombs from? Well, according to Mr. Mayhem himself, what would eventually become his trademark powerbomb symphony actually started out as a throwaway comment from AEW locker room leader Chris Jericho. After comparing the concept of MJF's then right-hand man pancaking his adversaries into the canvas with numerous powerbombs to the sight of Brock Lesnar taking his prey to Suplex City, Wardlow quickly assumed Le Champion may have just been ribbing him ever so slightly with this outrageous suggestion. But never one to back down from a challenge, the former TNT champion went all in on his new repeated powerbomb finishing sequence, and fans soon responded to the visual of the freakishly athletic and strong sensation executing such a mesmerizing feat with apparent ease. Regardless of whether it was initially just Jericho's way of teasing the colossal babyface or not, Wardlow fully embraced the bold idea, and said crowd-friendly conducting in the lead up to his now infamous multiple painful trips back down to the mat would soon go on to become one of the most popular features of Wardlow's world. Number 3. You Can't See Me was done on a dare. Just a few months on from a memorable debut opposite Kurt Angle in 2002, John Cena suddenly found himself in a rather worrying situation. With Vince McMahon and co. not exactly fully convinced by the young star fond of ruthless aggression, Cena soon wound up getting a little lost in the shuffle on the hardly watched Velocity show at the time, and was very much heading towards the WWE exit doors. However, during this period, Cena just so happened to witness his little brother performing a fairly odd dance, as the two were busting a move to a song that came on whilst the relative newcomer was at home one day. The eventual WWE champion's brother Shawn was moving his head around his hands, a move Cena would later claim was a version of the dance Tony Yayo did in one of the G-Unit videos. So with Cena having very little to lose and thinking it'd be hilarious to put the bizarre move on TV during one of said Velocity showings, the eventual legend did precisely that, on the back of his little bro daring him to, and his first ever You Can't See Me soon arrived on the scene. Fast forward 2 decades and Cena is still yet to be spotted. Number 2. DDP dropping his toothpick leads to a bad guy being born. Try as hard as you like, but you will sadly never quite be able to look as effortlessly cool as a toothpick-wielding Scott Hall. Trust me, I have tried. Hilariously though, popping the thin piece of wood in his mouth before firing it straight at the camera wasn't actually Razor Ramon's own idea at all. It actually came about when Hall and Diamond Dallas Page were performing a promo together, with the former still working under his Diamond Stud moniker on WCW in the early 90s. According to Dallas himself when discussing the origin of Hall's iconic toothpick throw on the DDP Snake Pit podcast, Page wanted to make the pair's first promo together a little special, so he advised Hall that the duo should take out the toothpicks they had in their mouths and flick them at the camera once they'd finished their segment. Unfortunately for DDP, during the promo, his own pick dropped straight out of his gob, but his loss was Hall's gain, as Page's partner simply picked out the wood and smoothly flicked the toothpick at the camera without skipping a damn beat. As the former WCW World Heavyweight Champion brilliantly put it, he took that toothpick out ding, and you know, bad guy was born, man. Number 1, Stone Cold Steve Austin's "What" chant came about during a Christian call. While speaking on the Pat McAfee show, Stone Cold Steve Austin would tell the host a story about how his infamous "What" chant actually came into being after Christian Cage didn't pick up the phone to the Texas Rattlesnake one day, so he's to blame. But instead of simply trying again later, the bionic redneck opted to leave Captain Charisma a message. And it was during that 2-minute prank voicemail that something magical/dreadful was forged. Fully leaning into his life as an on-screen heel at the time, Austin did everything he could to annoy the crap out of Cage by replying to himself with incessant "what" answers throughout the message. And it didn't take long for the biggest star in the business to realize he may be onto something with this frustrating one-word response. So regardless of whether he was rubbing a babyface up the wrong way or inviting the crowd to derail a villainous heel, the "what" chant would never be too far away from Austin for the remainder of his run, or any of the other unfortunate stars to step in front of a lazy crowd who spot a few tantalizing pauses mid-promo. When will it end? And that's our list. Know of any other behind-the-scenes reasons for wrestling characters' quirks? Then why don't you let us know all about them in the comment section right down below? And don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're down there. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then why not head on over to whatculture.com and find some more incredible articles just like the one this video you're watching right this second is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Thank you as always for watching this lovely video today. Hopefully I'll see your faces very, very soon, but in the meantime, hey, be good to yourself and you're alright. Bye-bye.